Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another episode of the Blacksters Furnace with me, Robert.
With me, Pete.
Man like Mo, yeah, you a deep voice and that. For me. I heard my voice
Finally
and I was
back.
like, yo, hey, don't cut me off like that, fam.
Finally back. But yes,
I know where you live, you know. I'll come to your house and don't cut me
I'll
off
come
like
to your house, bro.
So unnecessary.
Anyway, the furnace is full.
Hey,
Not only is it
overflowing.
full, it's overflowing.
hey.
It's been a while since there's been this much testosterone on the furnace.
What?
What?
That's not where I thought you were going with it, but okay.
Oh yeah, so we have three very special guests today. We've got David, we've got Ayo, we've got Ade. Thank you guys for coming down at such late notice. Because I think I asked Peter, a couple of days ago?
Well, yeah, and then I only asked him today. I completely forgot and only reached out today, so I really appreciate you guys coming down.
Thank you for making the time. Just going to say from now, Peter, you're going to have to slap on that 18 plus sticker on this episode.
Straight away.
But yeah, do you want to do sorry not sorry, or do you want to just jump into?
Hey, do you know what? Let's do sorry not sorry. I'm in the hot seat because I haven't been in for a minute. I'm curious to see what these men are going to drop. I feel like there's going to be some interesting questions here.
All right, but before we do that, I have a story.
Okay.
I need to share my pain for the day.
Story time.
So it was the work Christmas party today, right? It's November, but it's Christmas party.
In November, you have Christmas parties.
I know, right? And it's my first ever work Christmas party, so I was so excited. It gave me the opportunity to finally buy a Christmas jumper. So I got one specially for the Christmas party. And let me just show you. Let me give you the oops, no, sorry, that's my banner. A second.
I have to cover his belly. That's mad.
Okay, look.
Come on, Street Fighter fit.
Yeah.
Cool. So I got it. I was excited. I was ready for the day. I get into the office. They're like, there was this one girl, one colleague, and she's from South Africa. You know how South Africans have that accent that sounds like they're like British, like posh British. She was like, "Oh, Robert, what is that on your T-shirt? Is that people doing kung fu?" And I was like, "No, I didn't shout because obviously office voices." I was like, "No, it's Street Fighter." And like, when someone's like, oh, pretending like they know what you're talking about, but they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there were like 16, 70 people that we went with for Christmas stuff. Not a single person knew who was on the shirt.
Seriously?
I'm thinking I'm in the wrong place.
Oh.
But it was a nice Christmas dinner. We had a nice Christmas activity, which was great. And then I had my first after work going to the pub as well.
That's interesting.
So now I feel proper British now. I've lived the British experience.
Because you went to the pub.
Yeah. For after work drinks.
How does that work? Because you work for a church.
Oh, bro, them man back it. What you mean? Them man back it.
Rob, how can this be sending
Ayo, what sort of Nollywood film are you on?
You just need the music behind
You know,
it.
I'm gonna put it on auto and just let it ride.
I see red lights. I'm like, yo, what's going on?
But yeah, at work, they sent an email around saying that they're gonna do a pub crawl, like through all the places through Kensington. So
Man, like getting sloshed.
it's a church, but it's still Britain.
Do you know what? Yeah, when I worked in the church, I may have dropped the name of the church on the podcast before. Hey, it is what it is, man. When I worked in the church, like they would literally have a Christmas party in the pub. Like they'll go to the pub to have the thing, but they did that for those who were like in the pub. So yeah, like they folded it in.
Interesting. I mean, what's the demographic though, Robert? of like age demographic of your workers? I'm surprised no one recognized Street Fighter because that's not new.
So in my office, I think they're mostly old. There's only like a couple people younger than me, and that's like 26, 28. And the rest are like anywhere between like 35 upwards.
Yeah,
it's the demographic. It's the demographic. It's not the age demographic, but the demographic.
Oh no, but like Street Fighter is like universal.
Yeah,
Though.
It is universal. It is universal. But yeah, when you come from a certain, let me not get into it. It's cool. Let me not get into it. Before my man walks into work with his P65 or whatever just on the table.
All right, cool. That was my woes. I just needed to get stuff off my chest. Thanks,
Sorry,
guys.
fam.
All right, so Moses wants to be in the hot seat. I think guys have all been on the podcast before. But yeah, sorry, not sorry is when we just be throwing what's it called? So it's like an apologetic style question round where we just throw questions out at to whoever's in the hot seat and they have to come up with their best answer. And Mo has decided to be in the hot seat this week. So if anyone's got a question for him, theology based or otherwise, let him have it.
So I had a question that stemmed from our Bible study we did on Tuesday. So Ade will probably be grinning, and thankfully I'm not asking Ade because of that an hour-long Bible study ended up being 2 hours, 2.5 hours because of this question. But I'll throw the question at you, Mo, which is actually I'll make it much more specific. Surrogacy.
Oof. Okay.
Is it a biblical concept that you would not even is it a biblical concept, but would you advise a Christian to do or not to do surrogacy if they were considering it?
Okay, so as a case
a
of
Christian couple.
they being another person's surrogate, or they like the husband impregnating somebody else and then taking a baby, or either way.
Either way, yeah.
Okay.
Not impregnating someone else, but someone else carrying their baby.
Okay, so not the physical act, but
no, definitely
putting the embryo into it. Okay, I mean,
into
concubines and that. If your wife is cool with it, but
no embryos. So literally a technological question. Yeah.
So I think Old Testament wise, we see the patriarchs talking about their brides talking about this, my handmaid will bear a child and the child will be mine. And so that notion of surrogacy is there. I would understand that as surrogacy in terms of even, I would understand that in surrogacy. And even that trajectory of if a wife's husband dies, then the brother takes her on, and then the first child is then the brother's to perpetuate that lineage. And would that be classified as surrogacy? Because technically you're bearing a child for somebody else. Yeah. And it's taking on the other person's name and lineage.
Being a sperm donor.
Yeah, essentially. And so it's almost, and that's encoded into the law where it's just like, yo, this is what we do to perpetuate the names of those who have passed within that specific context. But also Abraham impregnated his wives, I've forgotten her name, Hagar,
yeah.
And Israel, not Israel. Israel, yeah. Israel, obviously Rachel and Leah. He ended up, both of them came up with next two, and then boom, doing their thing. In those we kind of see things. So because of those, I wouldn't be able to say a hard fast no. I wouldn't be able to say a hard fast no. But I would almost bring it down to, especially since there's no penetrating happening in that situation. So technically it isn't cheating, it isn't adultery. I would put it down to a marital decision for you as a couple to decide if this is something that you want to do. Seeing allowances in the Bible for it. And some can argue trusting God to open your womb. Because even when Abraham and Sarah, they were like, God was like, you're going to have a child. And then Sarah was like, nah, have my handmaid, have Hagar. And like, God was like, no, I will open your womb. We have Samuel, his mum, who wasn't able to get pregnant. God opened up her womb. Like, we have Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth. God opened up her womb. So we have repeated instances where fertility has been a sign of God's blessing upon the marriage, upon the woman, upon the union. And so there is also space for argument as to, just pray for fertility, pray that God will do this. But I don't see the Bible being explicit against surrogacy, but actually folding surrogacy into the narrative of the redemptive narrative, even with Naomi and Ruth. Her first child, then be like, Naomi's like, I'm gonna take that child as mine and nurse the child and stuff. So there is that notion of surrogacy there. And so I would very much just say, if you're struggling to have a child, technology is at that space where you can have a quote unquote concubine without actually doing the concubining. If you as a couple are cool with that, go for it. But it would definitely be a case of pray around it. See if you both have peace around that. And also the challenge of what would it look like to trust in God for fertility.
That's good. I'm very happy with that. It wasn't, Tuesday's conversation, Tuesday's Bible study was a lot more far reaching. And surrogacy was just one small point of it. But I really like the comparison to less technologically assisted surrogacy that is in the Bible that's resulted in legitimate children. And now the technology just allows for it without the adultery. So no, that's dope. That's a dope response. Yeah, I'm happy with that.
Adi, are you happy with that?
You're muted
Robert.
if you're talking.
Yeah.
I see you, but yeah.
Well, I'm not talking.
No, I'm saying
I was going to say Robert because
He's trying so hard not to start another 2 hours by himself.
I know.
Try not to pull me up as a heretic in that.
Cool.
Hopefully, Adam's still with us. But yeah, Robert.
And does anyone else have a question for they want to throw Moses' way?
Just because of Pete's question, and as a newcomer here, and then as a guest, I'll throw one at Pete, Mo. Something I saw, I think yesterday actually, either on Twitter or Instagram. So apparently there was a wedding somewhere. I don't want to say what part of the world. And the pastor had been asking the couple before the marriage day, during the counseling, that if they kept themselves, no premarital sex. And they've been saying, they've done that. And then on the day, the guy took them to his office, just before the ceremony started. And he said, he just can't shake it off. The Holy Spirit keeps nudging him that he should ask them again, have you guys had sex before marriage? And they said no. And then it turned to the bride-to-be and said, are you sure this man hasn't touched you? And she said, no, we've only kissed and he's touched me, like touch. And the man apparently walked out of the office and said to the guest,
the juiciest part.
I glitched there. Oh, yeah, the suspense, right? So man walked out of the office and said to the guests, I know you guys came for a wedding, but unfortunately, we're not going to be able to proceed with this. And then didn't carry on with the wedding. Now, was he right?
No.
Raw.
I mean, there's so many questions baked into that. But what do you think about that?
No, he was wrong.
Do you want to elaborate?
Exactly. Just because if you think about it, they lied to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the church had the principle that he had clearly asked about, and they, in a sense, they denied what he had asked about. So, considering all of that, Yeah, and obviously the fact that you're calling off, it's pretty terrible, obviously. But yeah, what do you have to say about that? All things considered.
He was wrong.
Okay.
You don't cancel. You don't stop people from making a covenant before God because of a mistake, even if they've lied, even if whatever. They are about to make a covenant to each. They're about to make a commitment to themselves and a covenant before God and before man. You don't walk out and cancel it. You have taken that position to be like judge, executioner, whatever that thing goes, and just be like, bro, run me back my peas. Yeah, every single thing that I've paid for this wedding, run me back my peas. Like, it's yes, they shouldn't have lied. They shouldn't have done these things. There's a totally different way to handle it. You could have been like, some things have come to my attention that weren't discussed, blah blah blah, whatever. You could have addressed it in a totally different way rather than just coming out and saying the wedding's done. Yeah, I would be fuming. Even if I was in the wrong and I lied, I would be fuming because you don't like, bro. And I'm not saying shall we sin that grace may abound, certainly not, but there is grace, bro. There is grace, bro. And the way you handle that situation, there was no grace. For you to shut down the wedding, I am about to make a commitment to this person. So even if we had sex, my commitment now almost then puts whatever happens after this before God. We can deal with that afterwards. You can pull us to the side and like lay into us. You can do that afterwards. But don't annul this commitment because of that. You can walk us through why that was wrong, all of them stuff there afterwards, or even if you want to like be passive aggressive during the actual wedding, do your thing. Obviously there's still going to be issues there, but to cancel it, yeah, I'm fighting you, fam.
You do look like you're about to throw some balls.
Bro, I'm fighting you, fam. Like, it's mad. Are you mean? Well, everyone's come out to come to my wedding, and you step out talking about, oh yeah, there's no wedding, because yeah, fam. You see Robert's jumper? Yeah, that's going down.
Now, my thought was, why didn't anybody ask? Is there any other pastor in the building?
Yeah, just like come do this thing. Yeah,
bro. Anyone verified to do? Because it's you like. Why are you, bro? If these people weren't Christians, and they're gonna get married in the church, it's almost taken at face value that you guys already knocked boots. Are you going to annul my commitment to this person? You're going to deny me from committing myself to this person before God and before men because we've had sex? No, that don't make no sense. Yes, the Bible.
No, I think his reasoning was more of because they didn't declare it, right? They lied to it,
bro.
Has he not lied before?
Yeah,
bro.
Yeah.
My thing is,
I'm really not trying to deny this guy. I'm just trying to.
Like,
I'm not trying to defend him, brother. I'm not trying to defend this guy.
You know what? I feel like he would be one of those pastors that would talk. Have you seen a video where the guy's like, if you get to heaven and I'm not there, you have gone to hell?
Oh, the guy.
He's one of them. He's one of them, man.
He's one of them man's like, rapture's happening. It's like, no, I'm still here. It's not the rapture.
I'm still here.
I'm still here.
They've been kidnapped. Like, bro, nah. Because, that was not gracious whatsoever.
No, it's a case of, judge, jury, executioner, like you said. Taking the law into your own hands. It's either you meet my criteria or not. Which is, there's a bit of a lack.
I'm not marrying you.
I get that.
So mine is just he made a mistake. That was a severe mistake.
It also seems counterintuitive because one of the reasons Paul gives for marriage, and not and the big reason, but one of the reasons is to avoid sexual sin, and so it's like this is almost part of the solution to it, and you're like, no.
Fam,
go on, carry on.
Go back and keep doing what you're doing.
Imagine, yeah, you have woken up this morning, and let's be real, as married men, the day of your wedding, you're like, yo, it's about to go down tonight. So all of the years of you holding the floodgate down, yeah, you mentally you're there. Mentally you are there. You're in you're in the church, but mentally you're already in a hotel. You're there. And a man comes out, you can't do it. What? Fam,
Yeah,
I would
it's a
pray
bit
and be
harsh.
like, God, today my sin is on the pastor. My sin today is on the pastor. He will have to repent on my behalf. What? Nah.
Cool.
Yeah. Any others? I'm enjoying this, man.
Ade, have you got a question, David?
For Mo.
Yeah, Mo's in the hot seat today.
Okay. It could be any theological question.
Hey, yo, bro.
And it's like, how deep can I go?
It's true. We have to find out the parameters.
No, absolutely anything. Absolutely anything. And like with sorry not sorry, a valid answer is I don't know. And hopefully it's an honest answer. So yeah, don't worry. Anything you want.
Okay. I had this question in one of our Bible studies, and I just want to ask it again. Maybe Mo knows the answer. So basically, in Matthew 27, verse 52, it says that this is when Jesus had died and cried with a loud voice and gave up the ghost, that the graves were opened and many bodies of saints which slept arose and came out of the graves after his resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared unto many. What was the incident that happened there? Is that like how would you describe what happened there? What happened to those saints? Did they die again? Are those saints of old? What's the theological perspective that you have on that scripture?
This is one of them I plead the fifth type questions.
It's one of those places you go through, you never go to.
Bro, there's no stop signs on that passage. Nah. It's just a through road. The way that I've almost understood it, or I've always approached it, has been Jesus being the first fruits, or the Holy Spirit being the first fruits within us, but Jesus being the first to be raised after the resurrection. Obviously we have Lazarus being raised beforehand, and there was another man who was raised who was a widow's only child, and so as Jesus was walking past, he was dead. Jesus told him to stop the coffin. He touched the body arose. I almost understood it as verification of the resurrection, which the Jews believe in as one of the signs of the Messiah. So not only is the Messiah raised, but all those who will be found in him will be raised as well, and almost being like a sign or a testament to that. But because it wasn't widely reported, so the other synoptics don't say it, John's gospel doesn't say it either. So I almost see it as a specific going to the people that they knew and revealing themselves to them. But seeing it as along the lines of when Jesus spoke to Mary and Martha around Lazarus and saying there will be a resurrection. And it's like, we believe that there will be a resurrection like later on. And Jesus is like, no, I am the resurrection and the life. I almost see that as bleeding into that, in that after the resurrection of Jesus, they then saw the resurrection of others. But also recognizing that just because you were resurrected doesn't mean you're not going to die again. So like Lazarus died again. And so in terms of lifespan after resurrection, no idea. How they would have passed away, stuff like that, no idea. But naturally speaking, there was almost like a second expiry date, a second time that they fell asleep, until the fulfillment of however you read Revelations, the fulfillment of the final days, where everyone is then is raised in the newness of life, whether it's to eternal life or to mud hell. But yeah, so I saw it as a confirmation of Jesus being the resurrection and the life, and with his resurrection we then almost got a taste of resurrection without seeing the fullness of it. But yeah, I am happy to be wrong. But that's how I have understood that passage historically.
Okay, because it kind of states that they rose after he died, not after he was raised. They only came out of their grave after he was raised.
Yes.
So I was always wondering. I don't know if anybody else had that. In my head, I was thinking that
I do see a key relevance in that they were only seen after he was raised. And so they were only seen after his resurrection. So even if, even as the Bible states, they were raised at his death, but no one actually saw them until he was seen. And so his resurrection, in terms of verification, was first. And so he still remains the first to be raised, in that he was the first to be seen raised. And then
who are these saints that you think arose?
I have no idea. But it has to be it has to be those who had faith in the Messiah rather than in the Torah. But I have no idea who that would be. There isn't any indication in terms of New Testament who that might be.
Are you saying there's two resurrections from the dead, in terms of there's the one that happened when Jesus was raised, and then there's going to be one again?
So no, I believe that there is only one resurrection. No, there can't just be only one resurrection, because Jesus raised the dead. And we have the Old Testament prophets who raised the dead as well, some of them who raised the dead. And so there's almost like a lengthening of earthly lifespan. And then there's the resurrection from the dead. Jesus said, like when Jesus was speaking to Mary and Martha, he was like, I am the resurrection and the life, and you will see it. Do you believe that, I'm paraphrasing like mad, but do you believe that Lazarus will be raised again? And then they were like, at the resurrection at the end of time. And he's like, no, I am the resurrection and the life. And so seeing it almost as like, yeah, there is the
temporary resurrection.
No, so okay, so it's being raised in new bodies, as Paul would say. Like, this body is now dead and we're now raised in our heavenly bodies. That is the complete resurrection. But if you are still in your earthly body, then that's a almost like a pre-resurrection, like not quite the fullness. So it's like praying to be healed, and being healed doesn't mean that you won't fall sick again. But we know that in the resurrection, bro, you're not going to be sick. There's a newness of body. There's a newness of life. You're in God's presence. There is a tree that like restores everything, which is, again, I find it strange that you're in a body that you can't get sick, but there's a tree that heals every disease. It may just be God showing off. But just that sense of there is a fullness of God's, the manifestations of God's plans and purposes that happens at the end. And here we can almost taste of heaven. But that taste is still marred by the brokenness and fallenness of man until the fullness arrives. And that's how I see it. That's how I have seen it historically.
Bro, I'm so happy I was not in the hot seat today.
Bro, that question was dope. Had me sweating there, boy. I don't even know if Ade is happy with it, to be fair.
That's good. That's good.
Dope.
Cool.
All right, let's rock and roll with today's topic.
Yes, sir.
So I specifically asked Peter to try and find me some married men because of the content of this conversation. And this conversation was actually inspired by Peter.
What?
Oh.
That is not a good sign.
Let me give the backstory. Peter, feel free to fill in or not fill in any details that I choose to specifically miss out.
Okay,
great.
Cool.
So, last Saturday, right? My wife was out with some friends, and along their journeys, one of the places they went to was a sex shop where it had all the sex stuff, all the toys, all the straps, all the paddles, all of that good stuff. All of that. Now, Peter found out about this and he became very excited. Right. He was very excited when he heard about this trip. And for the past and he was talking about how, we need more of this. We need to be having more of these conversations and more of these happenings, all of that. He was Peter looking for a reason to bring out the latex. He just waited for the
Oh dear.
And so that's the backstory. Now, a bit more of a backstory. So I've been married for 11 months now.
Come on.
And it's interesting hearing the conversations that my wife has with her friends. And then recently, one conversation that she's been having with some of her Christian female friends is, around the topic of sex and, different facets of sex, because sex isn't really talked about like in Christendom like that. And then it got me thinking, like guys don't talk about sex less than girls talk about sex. And it seems like on one hand, we're supposed to have this brotherly camaraderie and be there for each other. But on the other hand, it's like when it comes to sex, every man is an island of their own. And so I guess my first question is sex among Christian men something that should be kept separate from what we share with each other? And if so, why? If not, how much should we share? And what should we share? Let's start with that.
So, interestingly, personally, I think it's a bit of a tricky one because whatever you share about sex is not exclusive to you, if that makes sense. There are other parties involved.
Hopefully.
I think. Yeah, we're gonna be very mature about this conversation, aren't we? Ideally,
so many questions, Bo. So many questions.
Ideally, there's one other party involved who, regardless of how much you share, whatever you share has implications for, if that makes sense. There's another party involved. So I think it becomes tricky because it's not just your story, it's not just your information. And whether or not that other party is comfortable with that information being shared needs to be taken into consideration. So I think that definitely might be one reason why maybe I think sex becomes a less talked about topic. But I'm sure there are others less gracious reasons why. But definitely in my head, that's one reason. Like, no matter what I say, if I say something, everyone's presumption will be that I'm referring to my wife, and so,
but then
in that position.
But then why doesn't that same protection extend to like marital problems? In terms of like if you're going through something with your wife, like I feel like Christian men are more likely to talk about that with their friends, and so why is there not that same protection over your wife in that regard?
Interestingly, I think And I don't know, hog the conversation, but I do think, interestingly, any sort of counseling type conversations I've had with people regarding marriage, sex is one of the first questions. How is the sex life? Because it becomes indicative of issues in the marriage. My old church, Lighthouse, they had a whole. They literally called it
dropping names now, yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm dropping names. No, because it's in their sex manual, as it were. Not sex manual. It's in their
manual. Come on.
No. And I actually say this in a complimentary fashion because I think they do really well to demystify and sort of make it a lot more accessible, even if I think they go a bit too far. But they've got a book called Model Marriage. That's their sort of marriage counseling handbook, if it were, and there's a whole chapter that they specifically tell you to not open until a week or so before the wedding, with diagrams and
come on.
So they do that, but
hey fam, have they got a website or something?
I can send you the PDF. I can send you the PDF.
Even better. Read that on the trains.
But they do have they've literally got a thing called the sexometer, and it's if you're not having sex a certain number of times, that could be indications of issues in the marriage. And I think that's a bit too far, but it generalizes some of the things, and it comes from, I guess, data and the general populace, but it does come up, I think, at least when you're doing any sort of counseling, because sex in the marriage, the frequency and intensity maybe of sex in the marriage can be indicative of issues.
And so the type of sex.
Definitely does come up, I think, but yeah.
Imagine and the type of sex, just slip that in there, yeah. Fam, the type of sex, so long as you and the missus agree, that's your business. Yeah.
Isn't that your favorite? Isn't that your favorite?
Oh, I was just about to say, like, one of my boys is like, bro, so long as it doesn't involve another person or animal, you man are good to do what you're doing.
Jesus.
You man are good to do what you're doing. And so I'm sitting here contrasting it between before I came to faith and after I came to faith. Before I came to faith, man, we will talk about it. And like explicit, vulgar, whatever, conquest, however it is, oh yeah, man, hit that or whatever, like, is all laid out. And it's part and parcel of conversation, to the point of even like, bro, man, then will be comparing porn websites and stuff. Like, it's just conversation, like facts. It's just conversation. You be having a conversation and you might leave it with like 3-4 more websites than you even knew when you first started the conversation. But I have found in my engagement with the church that the church's approach to sex and sexuality has been very lackluster. It leaves a lot like on the table. We almost shy away from it. We almost hope that people will learn about sex through osmosis or something. Like, I don't know. Like, it's just mad. And so if you're raised in a culture that doesn't speak about sex unless to tell you not to have it, when you're now in a position of having sex, how do you then start that conversation? How do you then like break this barrier that they have spent however long you try to be celibate for building? How do you then break that? But if there was a healthy approach to sex, or sex education or conversations around sex, even as people are single, even as people are kids, because bro, sex education starts in like primary school, young. But the church will not talk about it. They'll only say, oh yeah, sister so-and-so is no longer on the choir because she's been doing stuff she shouldn't need to be doing. Like,
she's been causing open sin.
Like that. So yeah, it's like sex is just this thing which is just like icky and nasty and stuff, but it isn't. Or that's how it is presented in my exposure to it, whilst outside of the church is very much like, no, like sex is good, sex is fun. But also we have the angle of, for men, sex is a display of your dominance, a display of your prowess or whatever. And so you want to show your boys that, yeah, like I get girls or whatever. And so for me personally, my approach to sex has been tainted by me before coming to faith, because I'm like, all the time that I had spoken about sex has very much been around, oh yeah, nah man, hit that, oh yeah, like, or whatever. It's been from a conquest perspective. And my perspective now is, my wife is not a conquest. My wife is not like a sexual trophy. And so the narrative that I have speaking about sex, the church hasn't given me a framework to speak about it in a way that contradicts what I used to do. It just hasn't given me a framework in general.
So what do you think, if you had to like come up with a framework, what would be some of the bones of it?
So I think a fundamental pillar would be, it would need to be honoring to both the marriage and my wife. And so what I mean by that practically isn't just presenting language which is vulgar or demeaning, or isn't presenting language that would, like, the last thing I'd want to do is speak about having sex with my wife, and then my wife walks into the room and my boys are looking at her with like raised eyebrows. You guys are getting clapped. I'm not gonna lie to you. If that ever happened, I'll be like, yo, fam, get out of my house. Don't be looking at my wife like that. Like, it don't work. I would want to speak about sexual activity in a way that retains a level of respect for her. And obviously part of that is on you guys' part, because you guys will need to check your heart and blah, 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 stuff like that. Part of that is on you guys' heart. But an approach to it where it isn't just like a smash and dash sort of conversation. And it isn't just going into the intricacies and nuance of it just for the sake of boasting. There would have to be a reason why I'm speaking about it. So if I am struggling or whatever, this and that, you'd like, fam, man's struggling and that, like, I've just be like, do any of you man take Viagra and that? Because it's getting peak, like, is it just speak? Like, obviously, I say obviously, it's not the case right now. It may be later on. I hope not, but it is where, isn't it? Like, fam, not gonna lie, man, hope's not in it. Man's trying to be like 75, 80, still being able to salute and thing. Yeah, but man. Yeah.
Why did you feel like that was important to clarify?
Exactly. Like,
I don't know. I honestly don't know. Yeah.
What you just did right now actually probably is more to the point of what I was thinking of. Sorry, I probably interrupted you there, Paul.
No, go for it.
I wonder if it's not sort of two dimensions to that question, like the level of conversation about sex with Christian men and then just simply with married men, right? Because I think, we can talk all day about the church's attitude to sex, but that affects both the women and the men, right? But it seems like Christian women actually talk about sex more. As Christian married women talk about sex more than Christian married men, because take it from what Rob is saying, that the kind of conversations you hear your wife saying, and I actually try to make sure I don't overhear those kind of conversations in my experience. But I know those conversations happen, and I know I don't have those conversations. So to me, it's probably more about us as men than it is about the church. And Mo, you've kind of been edging on some of the points there. Like, I think it's the change of status for us, and what suddenly sex completely means something different, right? So before marriage, and coincidentally could be before your faith, or before coming to Christ, or even, let's be honest, while you're in faith, sex is more of a conquest thing. It's something to brag about, all of those things. But when it comes to you being married, and this is about someone you love, then it actually feels different, because it actually relates to your vulnerability. Your vulnerability is tied into that topic now. And all of a sudden, I now see it like the same way we kind of struggle to talk about our emotions and other things. It then becomes one of those things that you're vulnerable to talk about. And what you were saying earlier, Pete, as well, I think is also the question of, Rob's question about, to what extent we assume talking about sex immediately means you talking about what you do with your wife. But actually, I don't think that's what our wives are talking about. There's a lot more conversations they have around other things. And I think mostly it's about them. You can start off the top of my head, at least the last two that I remember, it's, someone's personal preference as to the frequency of sex. That's got nothing to do with your husband. That's purely about them. Your physical and emotional and mental state before and after sex. That's nothing to do with the husband. It's about them. How your body reacts to your husband, or how there's been a change in how your body used to be with your husband and after. So there's actually a lot that they talk about without giving away, without breaching the privacy of their spouse. But for us, we don't think we can set those boundaries. We automatically just don't. And I wonder if it's just because it seems that's a bit too close to me being vulnerable. So I feel more like it's more of a change of before we got married, what sex meant to us versus after we got married. What the Christian factor, that's there's a little bit there, but I wonder if we should actually look at it more in that dimension first.
I like that angle still, car. I don't know for you, man, right now. I don't know how, but it's like, bro, in no way, shape, or form would I ever
talk about sex with us.
No. In no way, shape, or form would I be able to say to my man then from back in the day, yo, like after sex, I like to be cuddled, Nah.
Big spoon, little spoon.
Sometimes it's nice to be the little spoon.
Bro, just like after man's done my thing, just holding in it. Like, what? Get out of here, someone. And there's definitely that element of vulnerability and the emotional side that, again, generalizations and stuff isn't part of the natural conversation. And it's like, the funniest thing is every man started laughing because every man knows, like, yo, what? Yeah, nah, pan up.
The best part of that is the fact that this guy said, as this comic that said, even when you're married, you still don't want to ask for it, right? You don't want to say you're a bit.
It needs to be intuitive. Just know.
Exactly.
Just know. Exactly. And
I wanted to say something.
Go for it.
So basically, when I was in uni, I asked the question, and at the time, a lot of people laughed about it, and maybe a lot of people still laugh about it. I asked that, at the time we were talking about sex, and I asked, would the Holy Spirit, it says the Holy Spirit will teach us everything. And I asked, would the Holy Spirit teach us about sex?
I remember this question. I remember this question.
I think I remember it.
Yeah. And people told me basically you would have to learn by yourself and everything like that. But I realized at that time, from that question that I asked, that the question about sexual activity in the body of Christ is not something that has been given much thought, or if it's been given much thought, it's not very common. So there are 7 questions to ask usually when you're talking about sex. What does sex mean for men? What does sex mean for women? What does sex mean for God? What does sex mean for the church? What does it mean for the world? What does it mean for Satan? And then what does it mean for the family? So, if you have that framework where you're answering those 7 questions, then it's easier to talk about sex in a broader context rather than just a personal context. So for example, I didn't have any sexual activity with any women prior to marriage. Okay, so my wife is the first woman I actually had sex with ever. So, for me, sex was never about conquest. It was always about doing the will of God from a very young age, because I got saved when I was 14. Okay, but that doesn't mean I didn't watch pornography when I was 14 at the time. So I had the whole pornographic background, but as soon as I came to Christ, my first thing was, God, I need my head to be changed because I want to see women in a pure way, the way you see them. And so I began to seek the Lord. What does sex mean for you? Which is the first perspective, because that's the original design. And of course, I'm an engineer, so I'm thinking, God, when you created sex to be, sort of like for men and women, what did you intend? And I think that if Christian men can start from that place, then talking about sex would be less weird, because then it's more about doing the will of God more than it would be about just self-pleasure, and also for sex for men, usually the answer is not very philosophical. It's a lot of fun, conquest. So this is more from a counseling perspective. Guys just enjoy having sex. I think one time a lecturer found out that if he lectured past 20 minutes, people stopped paying attention. This is in class, and then he asked the guys, "What were you thinking after 20 minutes?" And I think 95% of the class, male, were thinking about sex, and only 15% of women were not thinking about sex.
What subject was he lecturing?
It's a psychology.
It doesn't matter. It does not matter.
It doesn't even matter. Okay, so but the thing is that what he found was that what sex meant for women was very different for what it meant for men. And so when you ask to women, why do you have sex? And so if we're going to talk about sex, for example, for men and women, or the sexual activity, it always has to answer the question, why do we have sex? For men, it's usually not philosophical, but for women, it's usually deeply philosophical. They want to connect to their husband, they want to feel love, they want to feel embraced, all that kind of stuff. Guys are just having fun, okay? And you could even see that sentiment even in the Songs of Songs as well. So I think that, if we answer the 7 questions, what sex means for men, for women, God, the church, the world, Satan, and the family, then I think we can just kick open the floodgates of actually talking about sex in a good context. Because then when you look from Satan's perspective, it will be totally about usury. It will be totally about defiling of the flesh. It will be totally about making sure that the body is not able to sort of integrate with the Holy Spirit properly. Because anybody who basically has sex outside of marriage or has fornication or adultery, they're sinning against their own body. And the body is supposed to be a temple of God. And so what happens when 2 temples or 2 bodies that, are carrying the Holy Spirit are having intimacy, sexual intimacy in the natural? There's supposed to be something that should be out of this world for Christianity. It should be much deeper than non-Christians, because they don't have the Holy Spirit inside. So it means that the love that we have in Christianity should be even more expressed within sexual activity. If you see what I'm trying to say, it should make it more holy and more beautiful to talk about. But sadly, sex has become a bit weird because of the worldly and fleshly aspect, and Satan and the world tainting what God originally designed from the beginning. But as you can see, if we were to talk about this, I can go for another 5 hours. I'll just shut up and yield the floor again.
Bro, hey, Ade, that pamphlet, that booklet needs to come out, yeah? I'm curious as to David as well, if you've got any thoughts.
Yeah, David, been getting quiet over there.
Yeah. So it's very enlightening seeing different, listening to different perspectives. But I just kind of want to touch on why my thought process around why men don't talk about sex with their wives, both Christian and non-Christian, and because I can see from both perspectives, because I have Christian and non-Christian friends. And what I find is there is an element of holding your partner in high esteem, and also when I think back to when I was younger, when I was around people that had sex, and all they talked about was, like you said earlier on, Mo, it's about the conquest. It's about what you did, what did you try, and it was more of a more interesting discussion. It didn't matter about who you were talking about. Whereas if you're in a marriage setting, you know who you're talking about, right? That's if you're faithful, that is. But you know who exactly you're talking about. So it becomes a matter of, how do you approach that conversation without necessarily reducing the esteem of the person you're in a relationship with in front of your peers or your friends or your brothers. And so that becomes a much more difficult conversation to have. So in reality, most men wouldn't share that information because they don't want their partners to look a certain way in the eyes of whoever they're speaking to. And they're just bringing it to a very basic level. You just find that women in general share more and do more than men do. It's just it's just almost like a natural thing. I don't particularly know the reasons why, but it just seems like women are more comfortable sharing on various levels, but men, there's a limit. It seems. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what I basically boil it down to, I suppose.
I find it.
I think
I am.
Now I was gonna just say to what David just said, that isn't it the same thing around emotions as well, though, that younger boys are not quite taught how to manage their emotions as much as girls are, in the sense that, you know, well, maybe not boys, but young men, you know, depends on where you grew up, I guess, you know, or your background. Sometimes it's not okay to cry as a guy.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's not okay to let loose on some emotions and stuff like that. So it kind of then cuts into different areas of our lives that we didn't really quite learn those things. And, you know, it's like, well, even when you're married and when you're grown up, you're still on the back foot as to, you know, learning how to share in a healthy way with people that you can actually trust. It was Tadashi, Mo and Pete, you should know Tadashi, a rapper that said on Instagram recently that as much as he grew up around women, you know, so much women in terms of sisters, cousins, he was raised by his mom and things like that. It felt like he never really learned how to have relationship with guys. He never knew, he had guys as friends all around growing up. And, you know, he could see the friendships that women built, but he didn't know how to share in a healthy manner with other guys. So, you know, that's something that some men would rather run away and back away if they find a guy trying to share too much. So, you know, now take that a step further. You now want to talk about sex, like, yo, brother.
and can I add to that as well? I wanted to say that also the church cannot play the role of the family. So there's the place where I think that the family has a massive role in sex education, both for men and for women. So it seems that sometimes as the Christian family, we've left that sex education to either the school or to third parties to sort of educate our own children, or even, you know, however young they are. So I think that fathers, because the whole realm of fatherhood, anyway, there's a massive gap, anyways, you know, statistics. I think fathers should be having conversation with their sons about sex and what it would mean for their future wives. And you know, maybe some of the areas where they've made mistakes, some of the areas where they could improve. Because if you could have that kind of conversation with your dad, then it actually lightens the mood. But most people thinking to talk about sex with their dad just feels awkward or weird. But actually, we have to normalize it.
My first conversation with my dad regarding sex was him.
I'm still waiting for that conversation with my dad, by the way.
Well, my dad just showed me the carpenter.
Maybe I'm no longer waiting. Well, I gave up on waiting for it.
My dad showed me the carpenter that used to work down the street. This is in Ghana, and it's like, if you have sex, the girl's gonna get pregnant. You're going to leave my house and go and become that carpenter's apprentice and take care of your family. That was my sex education.
Yeah, well, I think
tactics 101.
Bro, do you know what?
I think you have that, because I grew up with my grandparents and I never ever had a conversation about sex. Everything I knew or learned or heard about sex was either through school, through friends, through television, or through media, basically. So, you know, there's a massive gap there. So I could have learned anything and assumed that was like the norm. That was what that's what's expected of me, essentially. So yeah, massive gap. You're right. It starts in the family. It's not the responsibility of the church. The church kind of help and force and kind of shape individuals, but it rests on the family.
Yeah, and also for
go for it.
So I was going to say for the women as well. You know, usually on the altar, it's who gives this woman away, and again, it's the father's responsibility to also give the daughter as well in marriage. See? So I think that there's a place where the father's responsibility to educate sons about what it means to actually have sexual intimacy from all the perspective I spoke about, it's tremendously massive. So if this is why I think Paul was saying that if a man cannot look after his own house, how can he look after the church? So then that would give us question. If sex is not spoken about in the church so much, how well are people doing it in their own personal families? Do you see what I'm trying to say? So this is probably part of the problem.
Yeah, I think, bro. Like, I've never had a conversation with my dad around sex. And I actually sat down with my dad to have a difficult conversation with him a couple of years ago and just be like, yo, like, it's been mad. But like, I was in like year 10, year 11. And you know when you first start hearing about the jokes, some McDonald's workers put sperm into the burgers, ha 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 ha. So
I never heard those jokes, bro. Sorry.
Well,
it's in the milkshake, not the burger. It's in the milkshake.
Oh my god.
So I don't know what I was thinking. Yeah, I came home and then there was on the news report something about McDonald's, and I was in the room with my mum and I was like, yeah. Some of them put sperm into the burgers, and then my mum goes, "What do you know about sperm?" I was like, "Nothing." I got up and left the room. That was the end of the conversation. But yeah, it's a case in which it may be cultural, it may be whatever, because I know that some white people, floodgates are open. Them man, like their parents be downstairs and them man are having sex upstairs. The parents are hearing it. It is just all mad. But their approach, the white people that I know, their approach to sex is different from the Afro-Caribbeans that I know. And so again, there may be some cultural connotations there around sexual conversations. But also I do think that from my engagement with sex from the jump, it has been a male-dominated environment. It's like forget about the woman, forget about the woman's emotion, forget about your emotion. It's about you. It has been conquest, it's been dominance, it's been a show of strength, a show of something. And with that connotation, it then pushes out any real vulnerable dialogue that comes into it, whether in the church or not. It does push out any vulnerable conversation like, and the funniest thing is, even the narrative from women towards men isn't emotional. We've got songs like Missy Elliott, Get Your Freak On, talking about I don't want no 1 minute man. So now in your mind, you're like, yo, I need to make my stroke game. I need to make my stroke game last. And again, there is this sense of being assessed by your performance, being assessed even during this thing. And so that even from the opposite sex, like talking about if you can't last 20 minutes, yeah, go away. Or if you're not hung like a horse, I don't want to talk to you. Like, it becomes a measure. Like, your manhood is tied to your manhood. Man.
Yeah. which then I would agree. I would argue has to do with the biological aspect of sex. So all they're talking about in that instance is, the fact that the woman can climax about 3 times during sexual activity, whilst if the man climaxes just 1 time, they're kind of done. So the man has to have more patience, more endurance, and then that will have to do with the character. And this is what I'm trying to say. I think that, if you look at the craving for a woman of sex, just usually now, especially if they've not engaged in regular sexual activity with different partners, if they've just been with one man. And if you ask the woman, usually the first man is usually they remember that for a very long time. Because, whilst for men, if we have many women, is conquest. For if a woman has many men, she's a hoe. It's not, it's not seen as a trophy.
Not in this new age. Not in this new age. Not in the new
I
age.
know.
Yeah.
But then from the men's perspective, though, if you're looking, you wouldn't want to be with a woman who's got like 20 or 30 body counts. It's not ideal. Imagine your lady comes and it's like, yeah, I've been with 30 other guys, darling. You kind of, you'd have to hear God from heaven to sort of go there. So,
no, but again, you see,
and I think,
I was just gonna say, I think the standards now are changing significantly.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's right is a different conversation. But I think it does.
Actually, they're not, though, Pete. Statistically, they're actually not. Statistically, they're not actually not. I've actually been looking at this in the last 4 or 5 weeks. So I'm a bit excited we're talking about this. And even in the world, they're realizing that women are realizing that men don't value women with high body counts. This is just all men across board, across the whole world. If a guy sees a woman with a high body count, they just looking at her as someone to just quickly have sex with and move on, not someone to get married with, stable and settle and bring home to their mother. That's not going to happen, even in today's climate. So today's climate has not changed that reality.
The feminist movement is trying to change that.
I know, but it's not working. But it's not working. So I'm trying to tell you.
When you've got slut walks that are celebrated, I wouldn't know if I'd be able to say it's not working.
Look at the statistics. It's not working.
Well, I think it's more of how where we are now in this time and age, how we are out this whole thing about tolerance, isn't it? And how we are more, we're less tabooish about certain conversations. And it's why it seems like, statistics might say the standards haven't really quite changed, but people are talking about it a lot more. A lot more women are actually willing to talk about their body counts more than before. And I think it's actually more about the scale as well. I think it's possible to have both the philosophical and the biological arguments for both genders, right? That sex can be both things for both. But I feel like men we always try too hard to tip the scale one way than the other, and women do, if that makes sense, in the sense that, men can actually feel quite mushy about sex, but we'd rather make it more about, conquest type stuff, right? Just the same way women can make sex
amongst
about
the men,
conquest, but women seem to make it more about, philosophical and emotion, touchy, lovey-dovey side of things. Do you get what I mean? So I feel like both feelings and attitudes towards sex, there's a tendency to have both attitudes towards sex in both genders. It's just that, what's the healthy balance, right, for each individual, right? What's the healthy balance of you actually, as a guy, actually treasuring sex as a beautiful emotional thing, than for it to be a physical activity that gets you there, and even in marriage, for some married men, it might just be a one bam, thank you, got the job done, got that tick done, I got that itch scratched, that's it, but is that healthy enough? Just like, maybe for women as well. Actually, I think, again, down to the culture and openness and being more, open about talking about stuff. Women are more open to considering the fact that they actually enjoy sex as a physical activity as well. It's not just an emotional thing of, I've satisfied my man. It's about, that connection with my man. It's like, I want something out of that. I would take it a step further, and I would think back in the days, women didn't really care too much about their satisfactions, climaxing and orgasm and etc. in a marriage. It was more about, if my husband gets there, I'm good. But now it's people are saying, women are more like, I would, bro, you better come back here and figure this out.
Where you going?
You better find that G spot.
But this is the thing, though. So
I feel
what
like
I'm trying to say is that
it's
the frequency.
What's the healthy balance is my question.
So if you ask most men right now, how many times a day would you crave to really go there? Most guys can have a healthy time 3 or 4 times. Some men even crave sex 7 times a day. If you ask your average woman, how many times would you want to go there? I'm not talking about the extreme cases now. You're on the average scale. How many times do you want to go there? Most of them will probably say once a week or twice. And this is just from speaking to real women who are looking at it.
Think about what you said earlier.
Talking about
Think about what you said earlier.
I'm talking about studies that have been done now. This is just more studies that have been done with a large scale of women. I'm talking about thousands and thousands of women. So I'm not talking in terms of just like my hunch with the 1 or 2 women in mind.
No. I'm talking on the large I agree with you. Keeping it scientific. But what you said earlier, like once a man releases, it takes a lot out of you. I've heard people talk about so apparently some guys, Kevin Gates, the name comes, some of you guys might know him as a rapper.
Why?
I saw some interview where my man was talking about, apparently some people started practicing this whole thing of not releasing as a man because you're keeping your virtue, you're able to achieve more in life by not ejaculating. Absolute pure nonsense, in my opinion. Because semen retention. Because there's something about ejaculating is
that
about
sounds horrible.
a mouse. What's the it takes out the same amount. It takes out the same amount of energy as you running a mile or something like that. But anyway.
isn't that why like boxers don't have sex before fights so that
that's also a myth. That's also a myth.
Yeah.
It's a myth.
That's like going to have a shower and not using soap. Fam, what's the point?
all I know is that I had an exhaustive list of criteria before I chose my career. I would have never gone into boxing if that was a thing. But anyway, like if a man, you're saying if a man, releases, like, you're done, but a woman could keep going kind of stuff. So how can you say
they could up to 3 times?
In my mind, I might want to do 3 times a day, but my body is gonna override.
Bro, I'm tapped out. Just
no, I know. So, but this is the thing. Okay, I'm talking about the craving. Exactly, but this is what I'm saying. I'm talking about the craving. Right. Men crave it a whole lot more. So some guys, for example, will go to the club. They'll go to the club, take a lady home, do what they have to do, come back and take another one and take them home again. Literally, some guys have done this. No, seriously. Some guys can actually go that crazy, and some girls can too, by the way. So I'm not saying this is your typical, I'm not saying the odd cases, but I'm saying more on a general overall basis that the craving in women is slightly different from the craving in men, because the why for sex is not the same thing. Usually. But I'm not saying that this is the case for everybody. It's not like a general rule.
Yeah, I agree with that. So more reason why I'm thinking it's more of a thing that it's generation after generation, time and time again. It's been our species, our gender's attitude towards sex that has kind of, wired our minds that way, that we've now arrived at that place. Because if biologically our body is not in tune with that kind of thing, then something has happened along the way to bring us to that place that our minds is not quite in sync with our body. And it goes back to, talking about sex and how, it's not it's something that parents need to be, dads, fathers used to be conscious about, and I think it goes beyond just being willing and ready to talk about sex in itself at some point with your child. I think it's also about creating that avenue, that opportunity for your children to actually feel free to talk to you, for your sons to want to talk to you. This is something that's actually becoming very real to me as a father of both a boy and a girl, by God's grace. So we went to Nigeria recently, sorry for the slight digress, and that experience, one of the things that happened, my brother-in-law, it was the first time seeing my 7-year-old son being so chatty, and actually, he's not so much a babbling child, a babbling baby. He's actually having full conversations, and he's got his own intellectual personality and all of that kind of stuff, and engaging grown people in conversation. And he gave me a feedback that, although it was positive, it's actually been a bit of a pressure on me, about how my 7-year-old son feels comfortable to have kind of conversations with me, no matter how weird it is. And then one day we went to my brother-in-law's house, and his girlfriend was there, and then we were about to leave, and then he was just gonna leave. His girlfriend wanted to give him a hug and say bye, but he missed it. He missed, the intention, and then walked away. And my son saw it, and he went and grabbed my brother-in-law and pulled him back to his girlfriend and said, give her a kiss properly. And to me, that was because he's associated what he sees with mom and dad do every time they want to leave with, this is what a guy must do with his girl. And I realized that there is so much for me to pay attention to as to the things that my son sees. And then he can feel comfortable to talk to me about it. Right. So that I have to lay the right foundations to get up to that point that when the time comes, obviously I'm not finna speak about sex with my 7-year-old right now, but that time will come at some point in the future. Bro, I need to have put. Well, that's another thing that is kind of, you need to figure out what's the right time, right? It's not about the age.
Yeah, there's a brother that I know.
And that is so much pressure, isn't it?
He's got a picture book, and is bro, the miser. Man, drop the name. Man, take the timestamp.
Let me take a timestamp.
Yeah. He's got a picture book. The picture book's got a penis sticking out. It's got titties flipping, and there's a kid's picture book. And like he's talking about, I was like, bro, I'm not there yet, but I'm also recognizing that I feel like the conversations, like rightly so, deviated slightly into why we're not having these conversations, and like trying to understand some of the underlying stuff that is preventing us from doing this, but almost wondering what would help us as individuals have these conversations. I think both Ayo and Ade mentioned something that for me, I'm like, these two things are key. So Ayo, you mentioned first that on the women's side, from your experience, they aren't necessarily talking about the act, but they're talking about themselves and their sexuality and stuff like that. And then Ade, you came with the looking at sex from God's perspective, sex from man's perspective, from the woman's perspective, and then 4 other perspectives. But it's almost like, okay, cool. There's almost like distinctions that I can approach it from, not just oh yeah, man's hit that. Oh yeah, now I went to the club and I picked up whatever. Like, not from that perspective, but very much just like, oh, like pause. That this is how, like, this is how I'm sexually inclined or whatever. And obviously there's going to be context to these conversations. Man's just not going to randomly come to the group chat and talk about, yo, is it actually it may be that case. I don't know, it may be the case. Oh, well, fam, like, yeah, it's not like, or whatever, oh boom, this and that, like, it's 3 times a week too much for you, man, or like whatever. Random conversations, and it just being normalized, recognizing that I am not particularly speaking about my wife or speaking about the act with her, but speaking about my sexuality and how I engage with my body, or whatever I am recognizing, or even just being like, oh yeah, after man hit 30 and that, yo, like, the minutes are getting lower, you know, like, is it just me, fam? Do I need to go do some cardio or something? Like, whatever. For me, recognizing that distinction, even during this conversation, has just opened a new window, or just like door that I never knew was there, to be like, yo, okay, I can approach this conversation from this perspective, which I was never aware of before.
I wanted to add to that point. The reason I brought in sex from God's perspective usually is because the whole sexual industry has been so perverted as well from a worldly perspective. And so as soon as you bring in the God perspective, then it gives room for talking about sex in a pure context, and also, sort of like almost pushing away the whole worldly aspect of things, so that we can look at it from a Christian perspective within the church, which is what I think Robert was starting with earlier on. How do we talk about this within the body of Christ? So that this becomes like a culture that actually talking about sex is not something that's awkward, it's not something that's weird, and it doesn't even have to be personal. Because, of course, it can be. I'm not saying it shouldn't be. Because some people could have some struggles, and there's a place for counseling and things of that nature. But if we can see what God intended with sex from the beginning, then it's a lot more joyful to actually talk about. It actually liberates us to talk about sex a whole lot more. Because when I look at Scripture, I think God's excited about the whole concept, because it does paint a bit of a unique picture. For example, when you look at 1 Corinthians 6, and it says that a woman who's joined to an harlot is one body with the harlot, but a person who's joined with Christ is one spirit with him. God's using the exact sexual activity that joins the body of a man to a harlot to say that our spirit is joined with him. So I think that's a very big thing to notice, that actually what God intended in sex is oneness. And so what does that then mean for the marriage? What does that mean for the body of Christ when we're saying we're one? Anyways, I'm not saying.
No, you're completely right. I think there's a couple of things there. One being, and something I'm taking from this conversation as well, is to be mindful of creating that environment at home where it's a conversation that, one, I know I'm going to have and I need to have, but one that my daughter will be comfortable having, and whatever children will be comfortable having. But then also, I think it's the fact that where the church has tried to play, they've taken it a step further, where it's like, no, let's not talk about sex, so that you're sticking your head in the sand. If we don't talk about sex, then the kids won't talk about sex. And that danger that is associated with sex, because it is such a physical thing, and because the Bible even rightly identifies all sins you can resist, sex flee. So they're like, no, let's not talk about it. Or it's taboo. My mom was like, don't look at women, don't look at women, don't look at women. And then 10 months after I got married, it's like, where's my daughter? Where's my grandchild? Sort of thing. And I think making it such that I think introducing that God aspect is important, but not being almost scared of sin. And I think that will come with having a good conversation about it, and having a open conversation about it, where you're not scared that if we suddenly talk about it, all they're going to want to do is have sex and then go and have sex with everyone and all of that. But actually, we can do it with grace, such that we recognize what it is. And the other thing as well is that people used to be getting married a lot earlier. Facts. And I think that fits actually a lot better with with our biology, such that when you hit puberty and you start having these cravings, then you get married and you're almost safe. But that's less sort of practice nowadays, and we're waiting till much later to get married, and dealing with that for much longer. And anyway, that's definitely something I'm taking away from it.
But we also I think at some point to
go, Adi.
No, I was going to say, to be good, I forgot my train of thought. It would be good at some point to even talk about the impact of sexual activity outside of marriage, but what that means once you get married, even in the church. So, when men say they've tapped that in the past, or they've had conquest, or when women have had high body counts, how is that played out in Christian marriages moving forward? Because most of the counseling problems and divorces that's happened, the more body count a woman has, the less she's able to actually have emotional connection with the man she's actually married to. So this is another big area of the whole body count disease, which is why some feminists are actually going against the body count. And when I mean feminists, I mean hardcore feminists are going against it because they're realizing it's the lead to greater divorce. So
yeah, I think we're in that conversation as well, and I know that is deviating. I'm also mindful of time because we're like hour 20. In that conversation, there would have to be space for abuses of sexuality in terms of like sexual assaults, rapes, and stuff. Because even if body count is low, your body count can literally be 2, but you've been raped. That experience alone will shape whether you're a male or female. That experience alone will shape the emotional intimacy and the reciprocity that you have with your partner within that space, and that again shapes the way that is like you navigate that space. And I guess that also feeds into Satan's agenda with sex, and how he's like trying to capture that narrative and trying to distort something that God has made so beautifully and so intentionally, and he's weaponizing it. And so that also is a deeply ingrained thing, not just culturally, but I just think across the board. But we have got like countries where rape is part of the military approach to like conquering areas. Like it's part, they won't waste a bullet. They would rather just rape the woman and save bullets. That's part of what their whole approach, and it's just so perverse, and that then leaves a long-lasting implication. So yeah, that feeds into that as well. But yeah, Robert as well, I know that you've been hella silent, boy.
Yeah, I was actually gonna throw it back to Robert, and I'm glad both of you spoke before me, because I was gonna say, as beautiful as it is that, Pete like said, and more, what I'm getting out of this is, that consciousness to normalize and also create an environment where we can talk about sex. But then I'm starting to think, actually, there might be at least 2 sides to talking about sex. They could be talking about sex as a concept, which I think is a great deal of what the church is not even doing, but potentially only as far as the church can go, to talk about how beautiful it is, how normal it is within the context of God, man, woman, church, etc., as Adi was saying. But that's kind of like conceptually, isn't it? But then there's also the practical side of talking about sex, which is where you put yourself, and that's where, like more what you're saying, it then comes about experiences and how you might have traumas, and you need someone to be able to talk to you about certain things. That's more personal. Exactly. That is different. That conversation of sex is very personal and it's not conceptual. And I was actually going to use that to throw it back at Robert that right at the beginning, and because you're being hella quiet, what were you asking about, the kind of conversations about sex? Were you saying more of the, why don't we talk about the sex as a concept, or why don't we talk about sex as a very personal and practical thing in our lives?
So before Robert answers, do you mind me just touching on that though? That the talking about sex as the concept is usually like the foundational theology to get personal. So if you see what I'm trying to say, so you need to start from somewhere, or you need to go back to an original model or design. So that's more the whole my thought behind that. It's almost like having a manual for let's say you want to do driving. You would do the theoretical aspect first, and then you do the practical aspect first, and after that. So by the time you do the practical aspect, you have a theoretical aspect to work with. So, but yeah, back to Robert.
Adi just gave me another joke right there. You had all the theory with sex before the practical, brother. If anyone remembers what Adi said about him watching porn as a teenager, but they had sex before he got married. He had all the theory, but no practice.
Thank God. It worked well.
It worked.
I think my the inspiration around this question was that it's just, it feels like sometimes in general men don't be sharing with other men. Like things have to get really bad before we want to open up with each other. And yeah, it almost feels like in life we are our own little islands. Even like within a marriage, like we can have that intimacy with our wife, but still have that part of us that is like separated. And I think that even with sex, that is something, especially once you become a Christian, because like you guys have been saying, you want to honor your wife, you want to honor the union. But there may be things where you might have questions, you might have worries, anxieties, frustrations, and there's no real avenue for you to get those out, or for us to even think that, oh, this is something I could talk to someone about. Yeah, so I was just throwing it out there, and yeah, my wife was just talking about, oh yeah, we should be talking about this, talking about that. She's having a good old time. And yeah, and I'm like, why can't the guys have that too? And like even on like a day to day, we're not good at sharing what's going on really. Like sometimes it's really like trying to draw blood from a rock. Trying to find out what's happening above the superficial level. You can talk about, oh, got the new laptop, got the new phone, but then
I feel like there's shots being sent here.
Oh no. Just because that's what was talked about at the beginning, so that's what came to mind. But even trying to get to that second lower level of like, oh, you know what, yeah, the day was a bit hard, it was a bit annoying. Like even that small level there, most of the time we don't get there. So to get into an even deeper level, it's like we're scared. I don't know if it's that we're scared. It's that in our minds there's just some things that we don't talk about. And it seems like sex is one of those things that is like one of those unspoken rules. We don't talk about sex. I think I can count on.
I guess.
I'll go for David.
I guess just like it's a very interesting sort of this point you faced there. I guess for me, like if I was to flip that around, I'd say like, okay, there's 6 of us here. If say you, Robert, had a question, so you within your sexual life or your sex life had a question or any sort of thing that you wanted to figure out in relation to your experience with sex, would you ask any of the 5 other guys here?
Now I'm going to Google.
And the question applies to everyone as well.
You need to Google.
Exactly. So that is in essence the problem here is it becomes and I think there's certain connotations to certain questions. Like for instance, if I come in here and I've got like we started at the beginning of the call, I've got an Apple MacBook Pro M1 Pro chip or whatever it is, that's an easier conversation to have because, man like Mo is going to say X and Peter is going to say that. And it's a very easy conversation because it doesn't necessarily feed into our deeper emotional, like where we are as a person. But if I go, well, I tried to have sex with, X lady or whatever, if I was married or not married, and I only lasted 20 seconds. There's a judgment that goes with that straight away. And that's a very difficult conversation to have, particularly if you don't feel like you can have that conversation with an individual, either be your friend, your brother, whoever. It's difficult. I don't think there's an easy answer to it, but I think there's a stigma there.
Yeah,
I think I know Ade was poised.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
I love that comment, and I think it cuts directly to the heart of this, where is how comfortable are we as men being vulnerable?
Yeah.
Because as soon as we are able to be vulnerable and we're comfortable with it, and we don't see, because being honest, men's vulnerability has been weaponized to a degree in certain circles and blah blah blah, and I'm sure that all of us have experienced it to different degrees. But how comfortable are we being vulnerable and finding a group of men who we are able to be vulnerable with, and actually utilizing that space for those purposes? I know that Robert was like, you would Google it, and yes, more than likely the knee-jerk response would be Googling. But in terms of the Furnace Group, I would have no qualms voice noting Amanda and being like, oh yeah, like X. But my initial response, my initial thought would be, let me just Google search. But the reality is, it's only until we have genuine, vulnerable conversations that we actually get to realize that more than likely, we're not alone in these situations. More than likely, the things that we think are out of norm aren't out of norm. They are the norm. Sometimes you can only last 2 pumps, and that's cool, fam. It's a bad day. Just hold it. Like that. Just hold it. Some days, fam, the Red Bull is doing the thing, so you're locked. But other days, you're tapped out. And that's the reality. But until we're able to get into that space of being comfortable, being vulnerable, we won't have these conversations. And vulnerability, masculine vulnerability, is definitely something that we need to reclaim. There's a narrative around it, and there are different propagandas and stuff, but we need to reclaim and reshape. We can't just allow the stereotypes to be perpetuated. But yeah.
I think Ade wanted to say something.
Yeah, sorry. I know I sound like a extreme theologian or whatever, but just bear with me for a second. Okay? I think that design does matter, because the way men relate to men, the way men relate to men, and the way women relate to women will always be different. And also because the way God designed men and the way God designed women, there are massive differences. So if you look at the Hebrew word for father, the Hebrew letter is the Aleph and the Beit, which is the head of the house. So it's literally, in the Hebrew, it's the structure of an ox, and then like a structure of a house. Literally, to talk about stability structure. But when you look at mother, it's the head of the water, the Aleph and the Mem, which is to do with almost like life or filling things up. That's the sort of like general connotation you get from the Hebrew. So when you look at how a lady relates and how her emotions and even the brain is wired, apparently scientifically, women have more white matter than gray matter. Men have more gray matter than white matter as well. So it means that for the men, we're almost like supercomputers. That's what the gray matter does for us. So it means that our thought processes and our thought patterns are totally different from women. So we usually would internalize something when we're trying to process. While for the lady, they would try to search, because that's what the white matter does. They would try to verbalize and to try and search what's the problem. So when two ladies are communicating, you're basically having two basically high-speed super internet try to search one another. But when you're looking at a man and a woman, you're looking at a supercomputer and an internet. That's usually the framework if you're looking at biology, but which, by the way, the Bible also suggests. So I think that masculine vulnerability, which most love, was talking about, and I do agree with you. But I think that the expression of it, the culture of it, it will look very different. That's number one. But number two, Robert, as you can notice, you're very good at doing. You have a pastoral perspective. So if you take, for example, within the church, the fivefold ministry, and you look at a teacher generally, teachers, if they're to approach the situation of how do we solve the problem of sex, they're going to look at books, they're going to look at history, they're going to look at science, they're going to look at everything else. If a pastor is to look at it, they're going to talk to people, they're going to be more personal. They're going to try and find out what's going on in the heart. How comes this is happening in your family background? What's really going on with you? So I think that God is giving the gifts within the body of Christ to form a culture where we can talk about some of these issues a bit better. So really, I think that each of us have to play a role in forming a culture where men can talk more freely about sex, can be more vulnerable, can talk about things that bother us more. But that would take time. It would take a lot of time.
Yeah.
I like that comment of time. We need to pay attention for the next generation. This is something that we're not talking about just weeks, months. If we do it, hopefully the next generation will feel it. It's something a little bit more normal, and then it get better.
Facts.
It's something that's beyond just us and now.
Come on.
Yeah. I think it's been a good conversation. I think it's definitely one to be revisited in a bit later down the line. It's been good. It has been great.
Open the real kind of worms there, boy.
Yeah. And like I even had a few other questions I wanted to ask, but didn't even get to ask them. So maybe next time. Or on another one of these sex episodes. But yeah. It isn't working. Hookups. Does anyone have any hookups? Anything that they want to tell the listeners about that they might find useful? It could be an app, it could be a book, it could be a movie, whatever.
I'll jump in first. Anime on, I think it's a Crunchyroll original situation, and I think it ties into this conversation as well. It's called Chainsaw. I think it's Chainsaw Man.
Chainsaw Man. Chase.
Yeah, Chainsaw Man. I'm not gonna give away everything, but the main protagonist, the whole reason he's trying to do what he's trying to do is to feel up gal. Like, that's the whole reason he's trying to do what he's doing. He's just after gal.
And you can turn into a chainsaw. He turns into a chainsaw.
Yeah, he can turn into a chainsaw demon. So he's like, yeah. Make of that what you will. But yeah, he's just after girls. He's trying to get a feel up. He's trying to live his best life sexually. And I feel it kind of flows in with it. So yeah, Chainsaw Man, that's my hookup.
It's a good series. It's a bit wild and all over the place, but it's good watch.
I can't watch that around.
That's great because I've never watched anime and I'm looking to watch it. So I got a subscription for Crunchyroll. So maybe I'll add that to my list.
Oh, I don't think that should be the first one you watch. You're trying to get
it. Straight into the deep end.
All right, I'll leave that for now then. But okay.
Add it to the list, though. Add it to the list.
Anyone else?
Right.
I haven't got
okay, I can go
for time, but yeah.
Yeah, go for David.
So I've got two, if I can.
Go for it.
There's a show on Netflix called From Scratch. If anyone hasn't watched it, it's really good, very emotionally engaging. Kind of feeds into a lot of like real life issues that we find, particularly as Black people, as men, as married couples, emotionally, financially. There are loads of like angles within that show, so well worth a watch if you can. And the second one is a podcast called Very Presidential, and it's, if you love American politics, it's about some of the great presidents of the United States of America and some of the damning details that you don't necessarily know about them. So yeah. really good listen. So yeah,
that's dope.
So I had two as well, but just quickly. So Acts of Marriage by Tim LaHaye and Redeeming Love by Francine River. 2 books.
That's good.
Redeeming Love is a really good book. It's a really good read.
Ooh, I'm coming back.
Ayo, anything from you?
Nah, not for me.
Cool.
Nah.
Okay. I've got 2 as well then. First is an app I found today. It's called Google Lens.
You just found this today.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's great. So basically, you get your phone.
Pete is ashamed of you.
I don't care. Yeah, you can just stay over there with your no hookups anyway. So yeah, Google Lens. You take a picture of something, and then it will show you results similar to what you take a picture of. And it could be a live picture. It can be like a photograph, and it'll find stuff in the photograph and find places online where you can find that thing in the picture. Yes, that.
Yeah,
and
you can also use it online. Like if you're looking at a part of a picture online and you can't find the whole picture, you can use Google Lens. So it comes in handy for like trivials or quizzes. So we had like pop quiz at work today.
Okay.
Not saying some mans were trying to cheat, but one of the questions was like you add images from a movie and you have to guess the movie. So you can just use Google Lens to search, and then obviously, hopefully, you'll find the movie.
Cool. And then my second hookup, along the lines of today's topic today, is a website. It's a company called Tingle Touch. Tingle Touch. They're a company that creates like sex games and sex activities. I think they've even got like a romantic, sexy advent calendar, and so every day you open it, and there's like I think there's like a chocolate or a toy or something that you can use or whatever.
Come on.
Yeah.
How did you find? It's not X-rated or anything.
It's
very much.
From a website called Tingle Touch, I'm not expecting anything to not be X-rated. Where?
I plead the blood.
You know what? Jumping on the two hookup thing as well. I recommend this book, Sex, Romance, and the Glory of God.
Hallelujah.
This book has been a lot by C.J. Mahoney. Sex, Romance, and the Glory of God. Like the whole premise of this book is off of the whole book is just based on the Song of Songs. So yeah, like he kind of digs into it and goes, yeah, so it's dope. It's dope.
Cool. Guys, where can we find you? Can we find you anywhere online? Any what's it called? Handles, social handles.
If you want to share.
Sure. Info at hishouse.online. Or you can find us at info@crdc.org.uk or info@authenticchristianity.com. Just ask for Ade.
Just ask for me. But ask first name basis. They fam got you. Just Google my name. His house come fam. They got you.
Yeah, and I'm just AY360, I think. Anyway.
Cool.
Yeah, and expenses 87 everywhere. So yeah.
Great, wonderful. Moses, do you want to plug your exhibition that's coming up?
Oh yeah. Hey,
we tried to do it last week, but we were very bad at it.
I'm mad. First solo photography exhibition coming up on the 12th of December in Kingston is part of Kingston's Black History Month stuff. So Writers and Scribes is taking over Kingston University for their Black History Month, and we're putting on different shows, and my first photography exhibition is a part of that. It's around finding wrestling with value in a land that doesn't always welcome you. So yeah, it's kind of using the water and stuff. So yeah, it's on the 12th of December from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. It's free. if you want to come down up in Kingston. We'll be dropping
Kingston University, yeah?
So it's not in the university itself. It's beside the station. So I'll give like the postcodes and them things there. Or you can just go on the Instagram, HMuseH. All information is gonna be there. Even go on Writers on Scribes' Instagram at Writers on Scribes. Information is there as well. So yeah, first solo exhibition. Safe for the shout. Thanks for reminding me as well.
No problem. All right, let me do this outro thing. Shout out to Ruth for the intro outro music, Calvin Turner for the Audrey and Maze logo. You can find us on Twitter at The Furnace UK, on Instagram at TBS Furnace. You can email us at tbsfurnace@hotmail.com. You can find us at soundcloud.com/The Blacksmith Furnace no apostrophe, on all good podcast websites and apps, The Blacksmith Furnace with no apostrophe. And that's it. Thank you guys for coming down, joining our conversation.
I saw it as 9 to 10 and we've gone till 11, so thank you guys for real.
Yeah. I hope God multiplies your sleep, boy.
Amen.
I have another meeting.
I'm not getting any
stress.
All right, well, this is the Blacksmith Furnace signing out.
Right.
Thank you.
Good looking.
Oh, I just got